Hello students. In the last lecture we had seen de Broglie hypothesis, according to which if radiation has dual nature, that means sometimes wave nature dominates and sometimes particle nature, then matter may also possess dual nature. That is, when particles are moving as per the de Broglie hypothesis, wave is associated with its motion and hence it behaves as a wave-like nature. So, moving particle sometimes exhibit as a particle-like nature and sometimes it exhibits as a wave-like nature. Then we have studied and determined the frequency and wavelength of a moving particle, and hence the frequency and wavelength of a wave associated with a material particle is to be named as matter waves. The waves which is associated with material particles is known as matter waves, and hence we have determined the wavelength of the matter waves, and hence the equation that we have got, lambda is equal to h upon square root 2 into m into q into v. This relation holds for any charged particle like electron, proton, or for even charged ions. And after this general equation, we have determined the wavelength of moving electron, and the value comes around 1.228 nanometer divided by square root of voltage, that is to be taken in volts. Next, the wave property of the electron was confirmed experimentally in 1927 by Davison and Germer. So let's see the next topic of the chapter, dual nature of radiation and matter, that is Davison and Germer experiment. A schematic of the experimental arrangement of the Davison and Germer experiment is shown in this figure. Let's see the construction and working of this experiment. The whole setup is enclosed in an evacuated chamber. It uses an electron gun, a device to produce electrons by heating tungsten filament F using a battery B there. Electrons from the gun are accelerated through vacuum to a desired velocity by applying suitable accelerating potential across the cylindrical anode. It is to be accelerated by this high tension battery and are collimated into a focused beam. This beam of electrons falls on a nickel crystal and is scattered in different directions by the atoms of the crystal there. Thus, in Davison and Germer experiment, electrons were used in place of light waves. scattered electrons were detected by an electron detector, this one, and the current was measured with the help of the galvanometer. By moving the detector on a circular scale, that is, by changing the scattering angle theta, this scattering angle is nothing but the angle between incident and scattered electron beams. The intensity of the scattered electrons was measured for different values of this scattering angle. Scattered intensity was found to be uniform in all directions, and hence the intensity pattern resembled a diffraction pattern with peaks corresponding to constructive interference and troughs to region of destructive interference. And from here it comes to know that the diffraction is a property of a wave. Hence, above observations implied that the electrons formed a diffraction pattern on scattering and that particles could show wave-like properties. Let's calculate the wavelength of this moving electron that is to be behaves as a wave-like nature. Now the Davidson and Germer varied the accelerating potential from 44 volt to 68 volt and observed a peak in the intensity of the scattered electrons at a scattering angle of 50 degree for a potential of 54 volt. That means when the accelerating potential is to be increased from the range 44 to 68 volt, as we are moving from the 44 volt, intensity is going to be increases, and hence the peak in the intensity is to be found at 54 voltage, and after that when 54 voltage it is to be increased more, the intensity is to be decreases over there, and for that particular 54 voltage it is to be found the scattering angle is to be made by the scattered electrons is 50 degree. So this peak was the result of constructive interference of the electrons scattered from different layers of the regularly spaced atoms of the nickel crystal. As diffraction is a property of a wave, and from the observations in this experiment implied that the electrons formed a diffraction pattern on scattering and that particles could show wave-like properties. That's why here we have to apply the Bragg's diffraction law, and as per the Bragg's diffraction formula for the first order diffraction maxima, here we have to use the formula lambda is equal to 2d sine phi, where d is the spacing between atomic planes of the nickel crystal that we had used here, and lambda is the wavelength of associated wave, and phi is the glancing angle. So the next is, what is the glancing angle? So here in the same experimental setup, the marking you can see is said to be a glancing angle, that is to be denoted as phi, and hence it is to be defined as the angle between the ray of the incident on the plane surface and the surface. So over here, the angle between the incident on the plane surface and this surface from where it is to be scattered, so this, and at this side also, here we can take it as a glancing angle, and hence we can calculate the value of the glancing angle also. So here, as a part of the experimental setup is shown in this diagram, here phi is to be mentioned, and hence the glancing angle phi can be calculated by the geometry, and it comes around as the total angle from the plane of the surface is 180 degree, and hence this 180 degree is equal to phi plus the scattering angle plus again the glancing angle, and hence the next step we can calculate over here as 180 degree is equals to 2 phi plus theta, where theta is the scattering angle, and hence finally 2 phi must be is equal to 180 minus theta, and we come to know the value of the glancing angle can be calculated, that must be is equal to 90 minus theta by 2. So here, as we know that for the scattering angle theta that comes at 50 degree, the value of the glancing angle by calculating the formula phi is equals to 90 minus theta by 2 comes around 65 degree. And for the nickel crystal, the spacing between atomic planes, that is to be denoted by D, the value is given here, that comes around 0.91 angstrom unit. Let us substitute the values of D and glancing angle in the formula of the Bragg's diffraction law. It will comes lambda is equals to, as it is 2d sine phi, so it becomes 2 into D, value of D is given in angstrom, here we have converted into meter by multiplying 10 raised to minus 10 factor, and hence the value of D will be written as 0.91 into 10 raised to minus 10 meter into sine phi, the value of phi comes about 65 degree, and when we are solving this, so 2d sine theta, over here we are getting the product as 1.65 into 10 raised to minus 10 meter, and the value of this wavelength which comes in meter, we are converting into the nanometer, and hence the wavelength of the electron wave that comes around 0.165 nanometer. So this value of the wavelength is nothing but the wavelength of the electron wave that has been found experimentally. That means by using the Davison and Germer experiment, the value of the moving electron which exhibits as a wave-like nature having the wavelength 0.165 nanometer. And by using de Broglie's relation, the wavelength of electron at accelerating voltage 54 volt, we are getting, as we know the formula, wavelength of electron, it comes around 1.228 nanometer divided by square root of V. so that here we can substitute the value of the accelerating voltage 54 volt here, and hence the equation comes to us lambda is equal to 1.228 nanometer upon square root of 54. When we will solve this, we are getting the value of wavelength is 0.167 nanometer. So the theoretical value of wavelength of electron we are getting as 0.167 nanometer, and the experimental value of wavelength of electron we are getting as 0.165 nanometer. So we can say that these two values of wavelength obtained from the experimental results and from the theoretical de Broglie relation were close in agreement, and hence we can say that the Davison and German experiment prove the de Broglie hypothesis of wave-particle duality and verified his relation. So let's discuss the next part of the chapter, that is the wave-particle duality of matter. As we come to know that material particles show wave-like nature under certain circumstances, and hence this phenomenon is known as wave-particle duality of matter. That means the matter under certain conditions will exhibit as a particle-like nature, and in some condition it will be exhibits as a wave-like nature when the particles are under the motion. And over here we can say that the wave-particle duality implies that all moving particles have an associated frequency and an associated wave number, and all waves have an associated energy and an associated momentum. As in certain condition, when the moving particles behaves as a wave-like nature, so it will be associated with the frequency and wavelength or wave number, and when it will be the moving particle will be behaves as a particle-like nature, so it associated with energy and momentum. Now, if all the material objects in motion have an associated wavelength and therefore an associated wave, why then we do not talk about wavelength of a child running with speed v on a pathway of 2 meter wide, or a car moving with speed v on a road 20 meter wide? To understand this, let us try to calculate these quantities by considering the following examples. One of the example is given 14.5 here. A student weighing 45 kilogram is running with a speed of 8 kilometer per hour on a footpath 2 meter wide. A small car weighing 1200 kilogram is moving with a speed of 60 km per hour on a 20 meter wide road. Calculate their de Broglie wavelengths. So first of all, we have to write down the given data here. As the velocity v1 of a student is given as 8 km per hour. That must be converting into meter per second. Kilometer is to be converting into meter by multiplying 10 raised to 3, and hour is to be converting into second by considering the value from hour to second as 3600 second. The mass of the student is given over here is 45 kilogram, and we are considering it as m1. Then next, for the car, the velocity we are considering as v2, and it is moving with 60 km per hour. So again it is to be converting into meter per second by considering the same method as we have done for v1. And m2 is considering as the mass of the car there, that is to be taken as 1200 kilogram. Then the momentum of a student for the mass m1 and v1, momentum p1 is to be considering as product of mass and velocity. So m1 is given as 45 and v1 is given as 8 into 10 raised to 3 divided by 3600. When we are calculating this, so we come to know the value of momentum of a student which is running with certain speed is given as 100 kilogram meter per second. And when we are calculating the momentum P2 for the car having mass m2 and v2, so mass m2 is given 1200 and velocity v2 is 60 into 10 raised to 3 divided by 3600, and when it is to be calculated, the value comes around 20,000 kilogram meter per second. That is for the momentum for the car there. Let us determine the de Broglie wavelength for the momentum p1 and for the momentum p2. So as per the de Broglie relation, lambda is equals to h upon p or h upon momentum. So lambda 1 is to be taken as h upon p1 by considering the value of h, that is 6.63 into 10 raised to minus 34 joule second, and P1 we have calculated and the value comes around 100 kilogram meter per second. So here we have to substitute the values for H and P1, and when we are calculating the de Broglie wavelength for a student running with a certain speed, so the de Broglie wavelength comes around 6.63 into 10 raised to minus 36 meter for the student. Similarly, we have to determine the de Broglie wavelength of a moving car also, and by considering the same formula, and hence it is to be written as lambda 2, that will be the de Broglie wavelength of a moving car, and it is h upon P2 there, where P2 is the momentum of the moving car. By substituting these values h and P2, here we are getting the value of the de Broglie wavelength of a car as 3.32 into 10 raised to minus 38 meter for the car there. The de Broglie wavelengths that is calculated here is very small, and in this example this wavelength are negligible compared to the size of the moving objects as well as to the widths of the paths on which the objects are moving. Therefore, the wavelengths associated with macroscopic particles do not play any significant role in our everyday life, and we need not consider their wave nature. Also, the wavelengths for the macroscopic particles are so small that they cannot be measured. On the other hand, if we try to estimate the associated de Broglie wavelength of a moving electron passing through a small aperture of size about 10 raised to minus 10 meter or an oxygen molecule in air, we will find it to be significant, as can be seen in the following example. Here, in this example 14.6, calculate the de Broglie wavelength of an electron moving with kinetic energy of 100 electron volt passing through a circular hole of a diameter 2 angstrom. So whenever we are solving any numerical, we have to first of all write down the necessary data which is given there. So here the kinetic energy is given around 100 electron volt, as here we are considering one system of unit, so that this electron volt is to be converting into joule, as energy is measured in joule there, and hence for this conversion we have to multiply the given factor with charge of the electron E, that is 1.6 into 10 raised to minus 19 coulomb, and hence the value of kinetic energy which is given in the electron volt can be converting into joule. Then next, over here, first of all we are determining the speed of the electron, that is given by the relation, as we know that the kinetic energy is half mv square. So this half mv square must be is equal to this much factor, which is 100 into 1.6 into 10 raised to minus joule. Okay, so here we can consider the velocity v will be is equals to, first of all here we have to arrange the formula. First of all, the v square becomes 100 into 1.6 into 10 raised to minus 19 joule, and this m upon 2 will comes on the another side as 2 upon m. So m is nothing but the mass of the electron, and the value is 9.11 into 10 raised to minus 31 kilogram. And hence finally the value of the velocity v, here we have to take the square root on another side, and finally the velocity v will be is equal to square root 2 into 100 into 1.6 into 10 raised to minus 19 joule, that must be divided by mass of the electron, that is 9.11 into 10 raised to minus 31 kilogram. So when we are solving this, the value of the velocity over here of a moving electron we are getting as 0.593 into 10 raised to 7 meter per second. Then next, for the momentum, as it is the product of mass and velocity, so mass over here is given as 9.11 into 10 raised to minus 31 kilogram, and that must be multiply with the velocity that we have calculated, and comes around 0.593 into 10 raised to 7 meter per second. And when we are multiplying these factors, so the momentum of the moving electron we are getting around 5.40 into 10 raised to minus 24 kilogram meter per second. And finally, after determining the momentum, we can calculate the de Broglie wavelength by using the relation, that is lambda is equals to h upon p. As we know, h is the Planck's constant. The value of the Planck's constant is 6.63 into 10 raised to minus 34 joule second, and momentum we have calculated, that comes around 5.40 into 10 raised to minus 24 kilogram meter per second. When we are calculating this ratio, so we are getting the de Broglie wavelength will be 1.23 into 10 raised to minus 10 meter, and hence this meter we are converting into angstrom, and here we have to multiply the factor with the 10 raised to 10 there. And finally, the de Broglie wavelength in angstrom we are getting as 1.23 angstrom there. So the wavelength of the electron in this example is comparable to the size of the hole. The size of the hole over here is given to you 2 angstrom, and the wavelength of the electron we are getting as 1.23 angstrom there. So we can say that the wavelength of electron is comparable to the size of the hole through which the electron is passing, and the wavelength associated with this electron is same as the size of the helium atom and more than double the size of the hydrogen atom. So here in this chapter, dual nature of radiation and matter, we have studied wave particle duality of electromagnetic radiation as well as wave particle duality of matter. That means the dual nature of radiation and matter we have studied, and in conclusion we can say that for both electromagnetic radiation and atomic and subatomic particles, particle nature is dominant during their interaction with matter. On the other hand, while traveling through space, particularly when their confinement is of the order of magnitude as their associated wavelength, the wave nature is dominant. So, here the chapter dual nature of radiation and matter is over. I hope you understand the chapter very well. Thank you.